I'd like to call the order the meeting of the Industrial and Community Development Committee. In attendance on the committee is myself, Councilor Saslaw is here, Councilor McGinn's here, Councilor Rosignol is here, Councilor Sharris. Also in attendance and welcome to participate, please, is Councilor Melville, Councilor O'Neill, Councilor Turco, Councilor Manning Martin, and Councilor Gravel. Thank you for being here on this off night. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, we had a prior commitment. A couple of councilors couldn't make it 6:30, so we're bumped it to 7:30. I hope you don't mind. We're trying to do some overlay district business tonight, and just as an item of interest, the change of of an R2 to an R4 for the King Street site is not on our agenda tonight, but there is a paperwork on it, but please ignore that. That is not being discussed this evening. So I would like to call up Community Development Director Kurt Bellavance to continue to talk about the overlay and how we can move forward on whatever the committee decides. Thank you. Mr. Bellavance, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. Kurt Bellavance, Community Development Director. Yes, I believe at the last subcommittee hearing, we discussed the residential overlay district. There was some question in regards to some of the parcels. I think the subcommittee had taken a vote to eliminate a few sections of that. We did keep basically 3 areas, 2 areas, Route 1 and then the mall area, those 2 areas. I've included some information within the packets that show those a little bit better. They've provided an address and a parcel number. I've also have the assessor's map here up on the screen, and I can pull out the particular areas if there's any question or you can't see those as well. Right now on the screen here, we're showing the mall area. You can see the overlay of the mall. There are several different properties around here. As you can see, this highlighted area of the mall, it's a funky kind of shape, and I believe that was they had made those adjustments back when Filene's actually built this wing over here, and they needed their own separate lot. So that was created. And there were a few other changes that the mall had made in regards to that. But this area here, as I kind of drag the mouse, covers that whole mall area down to this location here. Right here is the former Toys R Us, which is now the PGA Superstore, right where the mouse is. Next to that is the Shaw's building. The proposed line in your packet would be right in front of those stores, and going down here where it would split between Leahy and Medicine North. It includes that whole property all around here. The former Sears Automotive, which is becoming the Tesla, in front of that area and over here. I'll zoom in a little bit where it crosses the street, and you can see the parcels where it crosses. It includes this site here, which is the former MRI site. It crosses over to the street where this property here is the Alto Forno. There's a empty lot right here, which is included as well. And then these 3 parcels here. I'm sorry, this is the Alto Forno site. This one. This is the it's a medical office building which intersects Cross Street in Prospect. The Alto Forno site here, and then these 2 small lots. So that's where it crosses over. If anybody has any other questions in regards to that, I want to make sure that we're clear in the areas that we're identifying.
Councilor Rosignol, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you could expand that to see where the new PGA store is. I just have one quick question. So that parcel right there is all one, correct? So your proposal to make a residential overlay cuts that parcel off in half. So should we, considering that's all one parcel of land, should we include that outcrop?
I mean, I've seen it done several different ways where you'll intersect property lines, or you'll include the entire parcel. So it's really up to the council.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rossignol. Any other councilors?
I can move over to the Route 1 area next.
Stick with this.
Okay.
And see if there's any. Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Mr. Bellavance. Do we have any idea how many units could possibly fit in this area, or what we're looking at?
Yeah, so I don't want to make people nervous, but if you, and Councilor McGinn had asked me about this earlier, if you took down the mall and basically had empty property, the area is about 85 acres. So if you looked at the density, just the rough density would be close to 2,000 units. But that doesn't take into consideration the parking, the setback, the requirements for landscaping and so forth. So that would certainly be a reduction from that. Just purely on the density, though, you'd be looking at 2,000 units.
Okay, and if by chance this is approved, essentially we're just approving it to go forward for a special permit if someone desires to do that. But there's no by right building in this area.
Correct. Anything would have to come back to the City Council for approval. The entire residential overlay would be by special permit.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Turco, great questions. Thank you. Councilor Sharis, please.
Thank you. And just to be clear, we're not approving this tonight to take an effect. This is going to, so the people who are listening, it's going to another set of eyes, the Planning Committee, for there to take a look at it, to make a recommendation, up and down, sideways, what have you. Then that would come back to the council as a whole to vote to approve it or not, but still any development that went on would still need a special permit. Correct?
Correct. So the process, I believe this is probably the third time I've come before the subcommittee. So basically the subcommittee takes a look, and you've been giving me feedback in regards to this. We've made some modifications. So we're hoping to get to a point where the subcommittee says, okay, move this to the next step, which would be to the full City Council. And the full City Council would then say, okay, move this to the next step, have a public hearing before the Planning Board, which would then need to make a recommendation to the City Council. So then you have a public hearing before the City Council with a recommendation from the Planning Board. And at that point, if you adopted this, you're not adopting any projects. You're basically putting into place, allowing a project to then come back to you for a special permit in a public hearing process.
And the idea of this is to support the businesses that's there now with some residential. You see some places, I just visited the Assembly Square Mall, used to be, now it's Assembly Row, and it's a little outlets and stores and restaurants with some apartments above. I was pretty impressed with that, but the idea is not to eliminate the businesses or the mall with residential, is just to support at some portions, if it came to that, the ability for them to do that. Correct?
Correct. And what we've seen, Massachusetts and other places throughout the country, is that live work play. So you have, and one of the reasons we had originally changed the potential district was to eliminate all those commercial businesses, the office parks and office condos down off of Essex Green, Essex Center Drive, and Leahy Clinic. So, for example, if you had a building that you put in place You know, for example, where the, you'll hear a hearing next week about the big time circus. If you had actually put maybe a multifamily there, those people could work at one of the offices. They could work at Leahy Clinic, for example, a nurse, and then they could go and eat over at Tony C's and places like that. So they're taking, the whole philosophy and theory is that they take their car off the road. So it's one less car that someone's driving to somewhere and driving and so forth. And so that's the theory and the planning practice behind that, so that people can live, work, and play basically in one location.
And one more question. Do we have a tax bracket for an overlay already with residential and business?
Right now, the assessor's office, for example, the 1 Main, they'll be looking at as commercial as the first floor, and the second and third floor would be residential. I think they're taking a look at whether they can, entire multifamily project, whether that becomes a commercial entity itself and is charged at that rate versus it being charged at a residential rate. I don't have the answer right now, but I think that's something that they're looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sharas. Councilor Sasslaw, please.
Thank you. So I was just a little bit confused. I have to go back. I didn't quite understand Councilor Rosignol's question. I just want to go back. So the map I'm looking at is different than what I see up there, because there's labeling on the map that was in our packet, but I can't see the labeling up there. So I'll refer to the map that's in front of me. Shaw's, PGA, and Leahy, they're out of the out of the overlay, correct? Those properties?
This is the PGA Superstore right here, so the line would basically go in front of those. Even though this parcel and that parcel here are out, this portion of that parcel would be out as well, but this part of the parcel would be in. So the line is following where that mouse is going, right across. Straight.
So if I may, Councilor Sasslaw, the green that he highlights when he clicks on it is not inclusive. So that the color of the map is deceptive to what is actually the line, in case that's confusing you.
It's confusing me. When you say green, I see green property and I see green lines. I don't know. I'm confused. Green. So was there a reason why, even on that, why didn't you have the line go in front of the PGA store? It's very confusing. Was there a reason why you didn't put the green line in front of the PGA store to show that it was outside the boundary?
No, it's just I think we talked about it at the last meeting, and we kind of looked at drawing a line in front of those businesses versus including the businesses. I think that was the only reason.
So can we go back? I didn't understand your question. I'd like to have clarification of what Councilor Rosignol asked, so I understand.
Through the chair, if I may,
Yes,
for clarification. So that parcel is all one owner. So when it comes down and jets out, he's going to exclude the end of that parcel, right where the mouse is currently, but the rest of the parcel will take place, if I'm making any sense. So what, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Bellavance, so that parcel is all owned, like each block is all different ownerships of different parcels of land. So that parcel, that's the end boundary of the parcel, but we're excluding that end for residential.
Okay, and then, so the map that we have in front of us, if we go back, we blow it up and we go back to the Cross Street portion of it, where you had the medical office building, Alto Forno, and MRI, that's all stayed the same with the map that I have in front of me?
Yeah, so the lot here that's highlighted, that's the MRI. You cross the street, this is the office building that intersects Cross and Prospect. You come in this entrance here, and the building's here. This is the Alta Forno site here. This is an empty lot right here. And then this is the two just smaller lots right here that would be included. That one. And that.
So why didn't you put a green line there, out of curiosity? to show the whole boundary. And just, any reason why you didn't put the green line and you went with the orange line?
I'm colorblind, so I can't tell you what color the line is. That's why on the map, I gave you a highlighted line in your packages. This is the assessor's map, so how the colors are drawn up in the assessor's map, I can't tell you what that reason is.
On the map, and I'm very familiar with the property, if you take a right in to that driveway, take a right, move your cursor down. That piece of property will be in it. It will be in the zone. What is there right now? Was it a tailor store or something there, or?
No, that's an empty lot. So you have TD Bank. I think TD Bank is here, and you have Long's Jewelers, and then there's an empty lot.
I think that was the old jewelry store, Sempre. I think that's the lot. The tailor's on the other side of that driveway.
So is that parcel large enough to put apartments there?
No, that would have to be included in one of the other parcels if something was going to be developed in that spot.
In the parcel to the left of it, after the driveway, right there in front, that's one parcel owned by one person?
Yes, that is correct.
And the parcel to the left of it, it looks like there's two parcels. Are those two additional parcels owned by individual people?
Yes, and those also would be too small, but if they were combined, then there would possibly be an option for someone if that's what they wanted to develop.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of reinforcing a couple points made by Councilor Turco and Councilor Charis. Most of this property is Simon Mall, and I think Simon Mall has been doing a great job kind of reinventing itself and staying relevant, and I certainly hope that continues. But we need to look forward to things that could happen, and they haven't built malls like that mall in decades around the country. So we all know what's happening with changes in retail and so forth. So I just kind of look to the whole unintended consequence potential, and by doing this without putting something that requires that we keep the mix and mixed use concerns me a little bit. So I like Councilor Charis had said, we've seen where this works elsewhere, but we don't want to create something where all of a sudden the financial modeling indicates that the best thing they could possibly do is tear everything down and build housing, and that I realize they'd have to come here for a special permit, but that doesn't necessarily give me a lot of comfort. Who knows how a future council might view that? I just don't know. So I'd rather just see it built into the purpose of the overlay that we want to maintain that mix somehow, and just something. And I don't see that in there right now. I'd just like to see some language that would prevent what I believe is the unintended consequence of this thing going entirely residential, to that high end of the spectrum, whether it's 2,000 units or even in that ballpark. I don't know, but I don't think that's what we're setting out to do here. I think we want the mix. That would be while we're on this piece of it. A request I would have is to find a way to make sure that we haven't set ourselves up for that eventuality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Melville, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not a member of this committee, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this. I've had the I have spoken to a number of cities and towns over the last few years that this type of project has come before them, whether it be Assembly Row, what you're seeing in Saugus right now on Route 1, a couple of other locations and malls that are actually in much worse shape than our current mall. And I would agree with a lot of what Councilor McGinn states, is that the big fear is that when a developer sees that commercial use is no longer as viable as residential long-term, and the overhead that comes with it, and, you know, the other things that do go with that, with the market, that can be a liability. But Kurt, could you tell us roughly how much has Simon invested, or the mall invested in back into itself in the last 2 years? Do you have a ballpark for that?
I believe when the Nordstrom's wing, which was done in the late 2000s, was about $10 to $12 million investment, and then what's expected now with the Lifetime Fitness and the Bancroft Restaurant Row is closer to $100 million. So quite a bit, I'd say, they've invested in, say, the last 10 years and upcoming few years. So.
Wow. So that, I mean, so that's a pretty significant investment, I think, on the mall's part. And I do agree that we have to kind of, we have to find a way in which we can, you know, protect ourselves long term. But I do think it's in the best interest of the city of Peabody to find a way that at least allow the opportunity to give more tools in the toolbox for our community development in the mall to be successful. What we don't want is to drive by empty large lots and we all scratch our heads and say we only have really one choice at that time, because that's not really a choice at all. At least I think this here and this discussion that we're having now gives us that opportunity going forward. So I think it's important to note the investment the mall has made, and that they are our largest taxpayer, and how important they are to anchor them and give them the tools they need to survive in this community long term. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Melville. Councilor Sharris, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Kurt, up by Prospect and Cross, the two smaller parcels of land to the blue pie shape, those are houses already, aren't they? Homes?
Correct.
So
Right
if we, so it would be a reverse. Would be, if there's the parcel is big enough to combine, they would have to bring in business and not a residential, correct?
Well, I think that's one of the areas that that Councilor McGinn was bringing up. Is it, do they apply for the special permit and bring in residential under the residential overlay district, or do they maintain the existing underlying zoning and keep it commercial? And that would, again, you know, who's the developer, what are they looking to do with that site, and so forth. But that the residential overlay just gives them that option to do residential on those sites.
Sure. So is that commercial business zone now that's with homes on it?
Yeah, so the area is, I believe it's BR or BR1. Yeah, it's just, my guess is they're pre-existing non-conforming. If that's the tailor shop, then they would be conforming, which I believe it is, but I believe in the back parcel of that is an existing house. So the tailor shop's probably a conforming business use. The house is probably not.
And just to go along with Councilor McGinn, you said it perfectly. I think we know what we're looking for. We just don't want to be fall into something that we did not anticipate. And the language should be in there to protect what we're looking to do. So we understand. I think this board understands what we want to do and what we think we need to do, but also need to have that protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sharris. Any other councilors? If we could go, Councilor Gravel, please.
Thank you. I'm not on the committee as well, so I appreciate the opportunity. Well, I hear the concern about, you know, the potential for somebody taking a big bulldozer and making this 85 acres of open space, and we're worried about, you know, future councils. Future councils could withdraw the overlay, change the zoning. I mean, we only know what's happening now, any council at any time could say, I want the overlay anymore. And you'd have a bunch of non-conforming existing uses in place. And I mean, I hear, you know, I think sometimes by putting some of those things in, it might get a little more confusing, because if the overlay is being defined, and it's being defined in an area, for instance, where there isn't currently commercial use, and you put a commercial use requirement in there, you're going to have to develop a mixed use like up on Route 1 in a vacant parcel. I'm really not concerned about the future of this with the amount of investment that's gone on in the mall. I think it's, you know, it's good to consider, but I think with the special permit, you could stop anything. Density-wise, you could say it doesn't fit a good use for the city, and basically stop any project. So if somebody pulled the bulldozer out, you literally stop it in its tracks. But even putting language in does not guarantee that future councils won't change it, because that's their role. So I just would caution you on adding too much language associated with commercial mixed use, because there could be parcels, and I think there is one on Route 1. It's currently a piece of open space that has no commercial piece in it today. Just an opinion.
Councilors, what's your wish? Any other comments? Councilor McGinn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question procedurally, how are we going to step through this? I mean, we're kind of talking about the parcels now. Do you want to continue to talk about parcels and then go to the language, or do you, what's your...
We can do it either way. If we'd like to continue the discussion on parcels, if there's no more comments, then we'll go to language. Any other comments about the parcels in particular? Councilor Rossignol?
Just for clarification, we're just talking about the mall at the moment?
We are. We're going to separate them, and even though Mr. Bellavance has included it all the parcels on one map, one table, we're going to separate them and do them all first. So if there's no further questions on the parcels and would like to discuss language, Councilor McGinn, would you like to take that, or any other councilors like to discuss language? If there isn't, then we'll move forward on a vote. Councilor McGinn?
Yeah, well, there are a few changes to the language that I'd like to suggest. Some of these are items that were, gleaned from other areas of zoning. In particular, that we had included in the mill district, which I think made a lot of sense there, and make a lot of sense, would make a lot of sense in this particular overlay. The first one would be in the purpose section, to add not to detract from the livability and aesthetic qualities of the neighborhood in an abutting district. Another suggested add...
Councilor McGinn, if I can stop for 1 second.
Yep.
We are in the...
I'm in the purpose section, which is 6.15.2. These are suggested adds.
Yep.
So this is not language that's on on there. I'm suggesting this be added as additional points. So you've got a number of points there labeled A, B, C, so forth. So these would be additional. To the next point to add would be to minimize visual and functional conflicts between residential and non-residential uses within and abutting the district.
Excuse me, Councilor.
Yes.
I'm just trying to...
Councilor Sassler.
You're under 6.15.2, correct?
That's correct.
So can you just... I see them labeled by alphabetically. If you're going to... I'm trying to follow.
Yeah, so Councilor Sassler, so what I'm suggesting would be additions to the list that you have there. So there's really nothing to follow because I'm proposing some new language, and again, the context of that is language that we've incorporated elsewhere, so in zoning, which would ensure some level of consistency. So the next suggested add would be to promote a more efficient use of land while protecting natural resources such as water resources, wetlands, floodplains, and wildlife. This would be a modification to one existing mixed uses on the site or within the same structures and high quality design. Then if you jump to section 6.15.3 in district regulations, subsection C, there's a reference to site plan review there. Site plan shall be prepared and submitted in accordance with section 6.5.2. That's an incorrect reference. That should be a reference to section 12 of this ordinance. The section F, where it simply says affordable units 15% at the bottom, I'm suggesting that we strike that and add a new sentence to section H, which would be more consistent with how we call out inclusionary zoning elsewhere in zoning, and that would read: the provisions of inclusionary zonings, section 6.11, shall apply to all residential developments under this section 6.15 that involve the creation of one or more housing units, whether rental or ownership. And then it would go on to have the sentence that's already there. And then I would propose a new section K, which is: nothing in this section 6.15 shall be deemed to supersede the provisions of section 8. Building and residential development under this section 6.15 within the flood boundary district and/or within the wetlands conservancy district is prohibited. Then moving to section 6.15.4.2, I would add to the existing text there as follows: the residential overlay is an overlay district superimposed on underlying zoning districts. Within the residential overlay, the regulations for use, dimension, and all other provisions of zoning ordinance shall govern. The underlying zoning district shall remain in full force, except for those undergoing development in accordance with this section. Nothing in this section 6.15, shall be deemed to grant relief from the standards in the underlying zoning district for non-residential uses. Then moving on to 6.15.4.3, subsection A, I would add to the section heading where it says architectural character, I would say architectural character and energy considerations. And then I would add point 6, energy efficiency, and point 7, energy generation. And moving to that same section, section C, subsection 3, where it says street furnitures, benches, I would add the word bike racks. And then after the word kiosks, I would add the word signage, etc. And then at the very end of the document, I would add a new section, 6.15.4.10, titled Noise, which says, as a mixed-use center containing office and retail uses among others, it is acknowledged that tenants will be, as well as mechanical systems, may emit noise. All development shall comply with applicable state air pollution control regulations and policies in connection with sound levels to mitigate impact on residential uses within and abutting the district. Those would be my suggested updates, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn, just some minor changes. Any comments? I have a comment about how I would like to see this take place, but any comments from fellow councilors first?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
before you move on, obviously there's a lot there. I think it would make sense for all councilors to see that in writing.
That was my suggestion.
I don't think it would be reasonable to.
I'd like to, through Allison and Kurt, I'd like to have that proposed, if we could please, those proposed changes that Councilor McGinn has suggested, have that in paper for us to review, and which means that we will keep this in committee, at least this section of the overlay, until the language is updated. And are we on, I know we can discuss it later, but when's our next available opportunity for industrial community development?
Are you talking about an
Now
off
you wanna
Thursday?
do an off Thursday?
So the next off Thursday is the 21st of February.
Tim and I will get back to you on our next available date, if that's okay. Councilor Sasslaw, then Councilor Gravel.
I would just request that the suggestions that were made by Councilor McGinn, I'd like to see them separate, so I understand what we're proposing to add to
I agree.
the
Is it
existing.
possible to highlight the suggested changes and plug them into the applicable spot so that it's not part of the language, but we propose part of the language?
Yes, in Microsoft
okay,
Word,
Counsel?
you can highlight areas that are changed, and it's under review, and you'll be able to see the differences.
Thank you, Councilor. Thank you. Councilor Gravel, please.
I was only going to suggest if you were to get those language changes put in tonight, and you have to vote it out of committee anyway, and it would be in the packet for people to review for next Thursday, you can eliminate having this in committee for another week or two, so.
That's a great point. What do we have next Thursday for subs? Can you squeeze in a, I mean, if
Right now, for subs, we have Public Services Committee. I think that's at 6:30. We got Finance Committee at 7.
can we do a 6 o'clock?
Mr.
I
Chairman?
don't know if you can get it done in a half hour, but that's up to you.
Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to say the same thing. I don't think there's any way we're going to get that done in a half hour. And with the discussion involving the changes, and then we have the Big Apple Circus that night, I think it's going to be probably a long night, and that might not work.
I hate to keep tying us up I mean, we're doing off meetings, and Councilor McGinn, please, I'll be right.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I not to, for this to be interpreted as trying to bog this down, but, this is an important one, and I don't think it's one that we want to slam through in a 15-minute meeting.
All right.
There are a couple other things that I think Councilor Gravel raised some counterpoints to points raised with respect to how we deal with the mixed piece of it. We're kind of asking community development to weigh in on that, and we haven't seen that yet. Also, there was one other thing. I mean, there's, I think we need to look at, there's a couple of other things that I had kind of mentioned, and to Kurt, but I'd like to mention to the committee here that, that things like school bus accommodations, things like that, just don't exist today on the mall, but certainly would have to if there were people living up there and school children and so forth. That's kind of missing from there, and a couple things like that I think also community development needs to weigh in on. So I'd be advocating for the later date when we can go through this thoroughly and make sure that it gets a proper level of attention. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think you were misinterpreting what I was saying. I wasn't suggesting to try to ram it through in another subcommittee meeting. There were suggestions that were made tonight and that could be incorporated as an agenda item in a regular meeting when you vote to release it to the committee for debate. it can then be discussed and digested, and that's all I was suggesting. But if people feel more comfortable having another meeting, go for it.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Gravel. Councilor Turco, please. No, no.
Thank you, Chairman. If it helps, I can waive the, as a chairman of the subcommittee for next week, Public Services, I can, thank you. Public Services, I can waive that meeting, put it off, and if you want to have that time, I'm more than happy to yield.
That'd be great, thank you. We will take you up on that. So we will meet next week. Councilor Gravel's at 7, Finance. Let's do 6 o'clock if we can. Committee okay on that? Thank you.
Tim, can you just let people know?
Yeah, we'll reschedule public services. You want to go to the following regular meeting, the 28th?
Yeah, as long as the regular meeting, because I think the 21st, that might be school vacation too.
The 21st right now is an open date, so there's nothing scheduled before the regular meeting on the 28th, I don't believe. So you could,
Okay. Like I said,
you could do public services that night.
yeah, we could, whenever. I think this is, like I said, more than happy to wait.
Thank you, Councilor Sharis. So we're going to rediscuss next week the mall overlay, and now we'll move to Route 1, please. Mr. Bellavance, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have basically a blown-up area here where the mouse is Route 1. You'll see where 95 comes in from the east. And at this section right here, up the top of your screen is where the Lowell Street. So you have 95, Lowell Street right here, and then Route 1. So the parcels that were up for discussion, I'll pull those up. So one is this property right here. I'll pull it up again. I believe the property, at least on the map, is referenced as Max Trailer Park. So it's a mobile home property. This is Pine Street right here. Route 1 is right here. And then the other parcel is this parcel right, is actually these two parcels here.
If I may, everybody comfortable by the map that we have on our desks with Max Trailer Park being highlighted, outlined, and then the parcel, we called it parcel 4 in our prior meetings, the latitudes, we'll call it the latitudes parcel. Everybody comfortable with what is on our map on the desk, regardless of what we see color-wise on Councilor Sasslaw, please?
Is the Latitudes building actually above? Could you put the cursor on where the Latitudes building is, just so we're clear?
Now, I believe this property here is where the Herb Chambers is. This is the property here that has latitude. I think latitude is probably closer to this side.
On our map on our desk, latitude is highlighted and the entire triangle is highlighted.
Right, I'm sorry, latitude is on this parcel. So, but both parcels are included as part of the overlay.
Councilors, any questions of Mr. Bellavance? Councilor Sasslaw, please.
So I was under the impression we were just looking at 194 rear, not 194 for the overlay.
Can you be
Don't-
specific as to what 194
I
rear
believe
is?
Latitude is 194, isn't it, Mr. Bellavance?
I have 190 and 190 rear.
Excuse me. So I was under the assumption we were just looking to put the overlay on 190 rear. Not I was not I don't, unless it's the will of the committee, I wasn't looking to touch 190 at all, quite frankly. It's established multi-use businesses, and I certainly was not looking to include that, just to be clear. If it's the will of the committee, you know, it's open for discussion, but for purposes, I was just looking at 190 rear.
Counselor, can we go back? If I recall at the prior meeting, 178 was not, we were not willing to discuss. I'm trying to eliminate here, and then we'll go back to 190, 190 rear. This was parcel 3 on our original map, and I thought we could be wrong, but I thought we weren't going to move forward. We suggested there wasn't the will to move forward on 178, which is Max Trailer Park. Is that correct, Counselor?
No, I don't think that was. I think what we discussed is on the previous map, we had 4 pieces of property labeled.
1 and 2 were out.
1 and 2 on the southbound, northbound, correct? And 3 and 4 with the southbound. And we're coming back tonight to discuss 3 and 4.
Okay.
There were no objections, I don't
Okay,
believe,
thank
to
you.
3.
Councilors, any comments about the 3 parcels that we're talking about?
2.
Well, if we separate them 190, 190 rear, and then 178. Any comments? Councilor Sasslaw, please, then Councilor Turco.
I was going to, as we had last week, we had Mr. Greeley come up and talk a little bit about what he was looking to do down at Pulaski. Mr. Pimental, who I know a few of the councils met with, and I appreciate that, up at the parcel of land at 190 rear, is here tonight. I don't think all the councils got to meet him. I'd like to give him the opportunity to talk a little bit about, in the interest of transparency and the residents who abut the area, what he's looking to do. And I know he can't do it until we change it, but I think in the interest of transparency, it can only be helpful to both the councilors and the residents who abut the area, and to give him a few minutes to speak, as we did before to Mr. Greeley last week.
Sure, if there's no objection, councilors, we'd love to have Mr. Pimentel come up, please. Is he here?
Oh,
Welcome. Could you please state your name and address for the record?
yeah, my name's Arthur Pimentel. I live at 6 Jersey Lane in Middleton, Mass.
And what would you like to do if it's approved?
I'd just like to explain, I'm the owner-developer of the 190 rear Newberry Street, and we're proposing to build approximately 64 1- and 2-bedroom condominiums on that spot. That's what the overlay would allow us to do. We think it would be a great fit for the community. We've talked to some of the neighbors, and they're in favor of the development, and we just think that it would be a better fit for the community and the city.
Any questions of Mr. Pimentel? Councilors? Councilor Sharris, please.
Thank you for coming. Approximately, how big is that parcel there?
It's approximately 3 acres.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Pimentel. So the front parcel that Councilor Sasslaw mentioned, there's no intention on doing anything with that front parcel. It's only the rear parcel that's highlighted right now. So the portion where Latitudes is, I didn't know that was part of this overlay. but you have no intention of doing anything in that front parcel.
No, I do not.
Okay, and then just for my thoughts, the, on that map, and if you're not the guy to answer this, I apologize, but there's 2 dotted areas on there. Do you know what those are?
Yeah, those are retention ponds, and what they are is when we went for our order of conditions, we actually had to abolish the old. There was a previous order of conditions on the property, and we had to abolish that old one, and we had to form a new one. So that's what those are. Those are just that's an old map. Our retention ponds are similar to that, but they're just configured a little different. But it hasn't changed much.
Okay. And while I have you up there, Mr. Bellavance, could you just come up to the podium also? Could you just click on the buffer, excuse me, on the themes and put the wetlands district superimposed, right-hand corner, upper right-hand corner where it says themes. And would be under where is it? Water resources protection.
For heavy,
DEP wetlands, I'm sorry, DEP wetlands.
For a heavy equipment operator, you're pretty good with the technical stuff.
You just have to click the box on the right, DEP wetlands. Okay, and there's another overlay there too for that, through you to Councilor McGinn. What was the other one called? There's a, is it the natural resource protection area? The Conservancy is not listed on this.
Yeah, I
this
think
side.
you're looking for the Conservancy, which is not part of this.
No, I know, but there was, I thought there was an additional wetlands district that, actually, maybe it was Councilor Sasslaw and I had looked at. I don't know, check that one too and see what happens. All right, can you scroll back to that site? So, the green, so the area that's purple is listed as what? Zone 2 Wetlands Protection Area? Can you read that?
I believe that is, from what I can see.
Okay, does that mean anything to you? Because, you know, I did kind of glance through some of these, and then there's the dark green area and then the dotted green area, and they all seem to, they all seem to be some sort of wetlands area, and I just don't know if this means anything to community development, if they had intention of putting apartments in these areas?
There was I believe there was a former well out near this location, so I think at that time that was shown as the wellhead protection. Basically, we're withdrawing water from an aquifer. I don't believe those wells are in use any longer, but for whatever reason, that's still showing as that.
Okay, and what about the green and white area in the upper right-hand corner of the triangle? It's gone. I think you zoomed in too much.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Just that, yeah, that little green and white section next to the.
Right here?
Yep. Do we know what that is? Salt marsh, it says? Okay, so I guess my question is, Arthur, where is your building as opposed to all of this? Like, could you put it for us, like, in a specific area?
Yeah, it would be right in here. It would be right in, right in between those two redemption ponds. They've moved a little bit. We've reconfigured them, but it's right in this area. It's, boom, it was right in here.
Okay, and for those of you that don't know, what's not shown on this map is the Conservancy District, which there's some question whether the parcel is in the Conservancy District or not. I'm not an expert, but you've said that you've had it removed from the Conservancy District, or you have a document that says that it's no longer in the Conservancy District?
It's no longer in the Conservatory District.
Okay, and does the city has this information?
Yes.
Okay.
Attorney Kelty's here. He's the one who, wrote the order on that. He could explain it a little bit better than I could.
I mean, if nobody has questions, I just want to finish the wetlands
Sure.
portion of it, if I could
Okay.
ask Councilor Kelty. And I apologize, Councilor Rosano, you're on the committee, so if you want the floor, I'll give it to you.
No, Councilor Turco, keep going, please.
Councilor Sasser, I know that you mentioned earlier that you were not comfortable with the latitudes portion. Should we just immediately take that portion off? Just seeing the map and seeing the salt marsh and the wooded marsh, and I wouldn't feel comfortable with that front portion as well. So just in sake of time, I think that we should just immediately remove, at least that would be my suggestion, the front portion and take that off the table. But I'll yield to Councilor Sasslaw.
Yeah, we were discussing 190 rear anyway, so procedurally, we will get to that. Procedurally, we'll get to that. Let's finish. I appreciate your suggestion. Councilor Turco, you still have the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Attorney Kelty, if you could explain how all this got taken out of the Conservancy District.
Thank you. In 2006, I had presented a zone change in which we changed the elevation of Proctor Brook Conservancy District from 66 to 68.5. All of that came as a result of a elevation change and a zone change that took place up on Devil's Dishful and on Lake Street that was adopted by the City Council. And then we, using a process of interpolation, which is determining elevations that should be honored between the recited elevations. So for instance, we say upstream culvert under Route 1, then we say upstream of First Railroad culvert above Route 1. So we took the change that had occurred on Lake Street and out on Devil's Dishful, and we had brought that down, and that subsequently was adopted in 2006 by the City Council, where our elevation, which is protected, is now 68.5. The only areas in this particular piece of land that are anywhere near 68.5 in general, the entire elevation is 71 and 72, and we are therefore out of the Conservancy protected elevations. The only areas that are close to that 68 are those wetland areas, resource areas that are low-laying, kind of boggy areas, and they are even at that, they are at like 68.8, 68, and 69. So we are not within the Conservancy elevation, and that's how it occurred.
So I understand that portion of it, but if I read that correctly, the document you're reading from, and I don't have it with me, number 3 is the Pine Street culvert. Am I correct?
Yes.
That Conservancy elevation did not change. That's not 66 to 68. That's a lower number.
Pine Street is actually was changed to 74.5.
Correct. That's what I meant. The higher number.
From 72.9. Right. So everything was essentially elevated.
Right, so that, raising that number guarantees me that, see, I'm no expert in this, so I'm trying to understand it with you. So I don't know if it was the council's intention back then to change the Conservancy District in those back 2 lots. Matter of fact, there's some documents that state otherwise. But, matter of fact, I think in the special permit it says no residential allowed under the special permit for latitudes. And then secondarily, there was a letter written in 2006 or 7 by Councilor Athis that believes that the intent of the council was not to change those rear 2 parcels for residential. So I just don't want to contradict what was done, and I think, you know, I've mentioned this to Kurt. My fear is that we go backwards on everything we've done. So I want to make sure unequivocally that this isn't in the Conservancy District, that, you know, this isn't a wetlands district. And I think Councilor McGinn addressed some of that with some changes in language. But I just want you to know, for you and Arthur, when this comes, if this does happen to pass and comes before the full council, I would most definitely look for some newer information onto where this Conservancy District is, in whether it's, this infringes on that, just like we did at 795 Jubilee Drive. So the point of saying that to you is, if you have any indication that this might be in the Conservancy District, I would kind of back off right now until you make sure that you've done your due diligence and that it's not in there, because I don't think this council would have the will, and I don't mean to speak for everybody, but to put something in that district. That's all.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Attorney Kelty, where in zoning are those numbers that you're reciting? Because the elevations that you're citing, because I'm looking at it right now and I see different numbers. So this is potentially the source of some of my confusion. I don't.
A zoning amendment that occurred in July 20th. Well, it was introduced July 20th, 2006, and you finally adopted it in December of 2006, and they are in Section 434.
Section 434. Well, the
4.34. Well, now I think in our newest
it's in Section 8. It's in Section 8. I mean, as we sit here in 2019,
yeah.
It's in Section 8 of zoning, and those elevations are set. And you know, I see the upstream culvert of Pine Street at 72.9. So
that's Pine Street.
Yeah.
No, it's 74.9, 74.5.
Well, no.
I'm sorry. No, you're correct. It's 72.9.
Okay, so it's 72.9. And what was the other number that you recited?
The upstream culvert has gone from 68.5 to 66. I may have reversed that.
You did?
Yeah, I did. I'm sorry.
66.6. Is that right? Does that sound familiar?
Pardon?
66.6. Does that sound?
66.0.
66.0. Okay. Thank you, Attorney Kelty. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Sasslaw, please.
So I just had a question. I think you probably could answer this, Councilor Kelty. Right now, as far as what can be done on that land in our current zoning, you could build the hotels there. Is that correct?
And we have an order of conditions for that.
Okay. And out of curiosity, because I'm not an expert on it, could a 40B housing development go there?
40B could actually go anywhere. Yes.
Okay. I just for my
sure.
own
Yes.
and the public's information. That's fine. And I respect what my councilors are asking the questions. I guess I'll go back to what Councilor Gravel said earlier. You know, and even the mayor, you know, I look at the zoning as kind of a living, breathing document, and what was decided and put in the special conditions back in 2006, you know, absolutely looking to possibly change that. So I think that we're within our boundaries of doing that and looking at it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Councilor McGinn, please.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I certainly respect the comments of Councilor Sasslaw. But, you know, we need to be careful that we're not encouraging any development in a wetland conservancy district. I mean, we just need to know that that's not happening. This is not a ward-specific issue. If we encroach on areas that hold water today, that water is going to go somewhere. And as many of you know, it often comes to Ward 2. So it comes to Ward 1. It goes everywhere in the city. So this is something that these districts were put in place for a particular reason, and you know, I would agree. Going back in the history on this, there's a lot of information that could be construed as conflicting. I've reviewed a lot of it. I've talked to a lot of people, and there are clearly differing opinions on that. I think what matters is, what are the conditions today, and is it or is it not in an area that's going to, you know, if developed, would exacerbate flooding conditions in the city. So the language that I'm proposing wouldn't necessarily pass judgment on this site in isolation. It would It would be a standard by which we would view all of these sites in the overlay district to make sure that we're not developing in either a flood boundary district or in a wetland conservancy district. So that's the purpose of putting it forward that way, not to try to eliminate a parcel that may or may not fall into that district, because I agree with you that there are, I think, reasonable people could disagree based on the information, the history, but I think we need to take a fresh look at it now. Is it or isn't it? And, I don't think we're in a position to make that decision today, but I think should an application be forthcoming, we're gonna need to know. We're gonna need to have expert information at that time that's gonna help us make that determination, and I think that's very reasonable. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Councilor Sasslaw, please.
Thank you, and I agree with that. I think that what we're doing tonight and with the landowner here, they need to know the concerns that we're going to have, and I think I would agree with you, probably need to be addressed at the, if we ever get that point of a special permit hearing. The one thing from a layman's perspective, which I don't quite understand 100%, is so you can build a hotel by right today, that's going to cause some issues with water moving, and I also, am trying to take into account of, and I haven't heard from all the residents up there. I've heard from a few. I've spoken to the mobile home park behind. They know what's going on here tonight. They're aware of the situation, but I'm trying to gauge what's going to affect them more than me or you or any counselor as an abutting neighbor. So I totally understand where you're coming from, Councilman McGinn. I appreciate your due diligence, and as I said, I think that if this, for lack of a better word, gets kicked down the road and we come back and it does get approved, and then now we go to a special permit hearing, they certainly have been, we certainly know, I certainly can say that the petitioner would know what you're looking for in other councils, and I think that's a fair request. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Sasslaw. Councilor Turco, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to both Councilor Sasslaw and Councilor Kelty. I don't believe that the Conservancy District was even addressed when the hotel was approved through Concom. And when I did speak to Lucia last week, I believe she said it wasn't. I could be incorrect, but do you recall bringing that up before Concom, that
Yes,
whether the hotel was in the
we showed a
Conservancy?
plan that showed our elevations, and we have a statement that said we are not in the Conservancy elevation. And
Is that from the building commissioner or?
No, from our engineers, because the elevation is set forth in the zoning ordinance.
Oh, no, the reason I ask is because I thought with, when we did 795 Jubilee Drive, it's actually the decision of the building commissioner of whether you're in the Conservancy or not. I was wondering if that's what you meant when you said you had a piece of paper, that you had something from the city.
No.
No, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turco. Any other councilors? What's the will of the committee? Rosignol, if you would, now that we've discussed the parcel, would you please make a motion to remove the 190?
I'll yield to Councilor Sasslaw.
Thank you,
Councilor
Councilor
Sasslaw,
Rosignol.
please.
So I'd like to make a motion to remove the parcel of 190 Newberry Street from the overlay district. So move.
You heard the motion by Councilor Sasslaw. Roll call, please. Map 35, parcel 38X. So moved. Roll call, please.
Councilors McGinn,
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, on the motion, is 38X, is that the correct designation? I mean, I see that on the map. Are we certain that's the correct designation? I thought there was an A and a B. 38X?
X is 190, 38A is 190 rear.
Thank you, thank you. Yes. Yes.
Rosignol,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you, Councilor Rosendahl, for your suggestion. Councilor Sasslaw, would you like to take the floor?
I would. So I'd like to make a motion to include 190 Rear, Newbury Street, and 176 Newbury Street in the overlay. And I'll cede to the city clerk for the assessor map, correct numbers.
That motion include, send it to the planning board for a recommendation?
Yes.
No.
It would have to come to the city council as a whole.
That's true. We
Then
have
it
to
goes to
approve the
planning
language. Excuse me. We have to approve the language. Correct. Roll call vote, please.
Could we reread the motion, Mr. Chairman?
The motion is to include in the residential overlay district 190 Rear Newbury Street, which is 3538A, and 176 Newbury Street, which is 4718. Those two parcels.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. On the motion, through you to Community Development to Mr. Bellavance. So this other district, or this other parcel is MH, right? Which is a residential district?
Correct.
So we're residential on residential, basically. Is that the overlay is a residential overlay on a residential district?
Yes. It's a different residential type of use. So with the mobile home, you're allowed a certain residential use. This would be a different use.
But the underlying zoning stays intact, as it would in any other place where this overlay is applied. So we're not eliminating that MH. I'm going to support the motion, but it seems a little peculiar to me, given the kind of the mixed use type concept that we seem to be seeking here, but I will support the motion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Roll call vote, please. Unless there's any other comments, I'm sorry. Roll call vote, please.
Councilors McGinn,
Yes.
Rozignol,
Yes.
Sasslaw,
Yes.
Charis,
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
All right. So thank you for the hard work that went into that. I appreciate it. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move that we request that Community Development incorporate the various changes discussed tonight for consideration at the next committee meeting. So move.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. All in favor? Any opposed? It's a vote. Thank you. All right, we're going to move to the proposed zoning amendment, tables of uses, charitable retail use. Councilor McGinn, sorry, Community Development Director Bellavance, please.
Thank you, Councilor Gould. Yes, I believe at the last subcommittee meeting, we had discussions in regards to Habitat for Humanity, which was located in 58 Pulaski Street, towards the rear of that location. Actually, if you'd like, I'll pull it up on the map over here. So what I'm showing here in the map here is the front parcel here was the parcel that we're moving along with the mill overlay district, and the location of Habitat for Humanity is back here on a separate parcel. So the question came up of whether we should include that structure in the mill overlay district, and the decision, or at least suggestion, was that maybe there was an alternative way of assisting Habitat for Humanity in regards to their location and keeping them functioning. So what I did was the next morning I drafted some language in regards to allowing Habitat, or what I had put forward was a nonprofit or a philanthropic institution. So what was done was adding that as a potential use to the table to allow that type of use within the city limits and shown on the table of uses. So it's really broken into two sections. It would be one defining that use, as it's not really called for right now, and then basically saying where that use would be allowed to go. So the information that was presented to the subcommittee last week was a definition of that use, and then identifying that in a location within the city. So you have that information in front of you. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilor McGinn, please. Thank you, Mr. Bellavance. Councilor McGinn, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think, as Mr. Bellavance just kind of summarized why the proposal he did, why he put that forward, and kind of how he got here. I think, as you might recall back to some of the original debate on when this first was, the initial pass at this was rejected. It was for a much larger footprint, for a much wider range of uses across a number of zoning districts. What Mr. Bellavance put forward here, which narrows that down and I think requires a little bit of additional narrowing down, just so that we don't get into kind of debates about what's a charitable organization. So I have some language here that I would like to suggest to build on what Mr. Bellavance has put forward, and I'll offer that now. So it would be in section 1, by amending 4.2.5 uses, by adding the use charitable retail facility of less than 12,000 square feet in size, where such charitable entity is a nonprofit organization with an IRS 501c3 designation and is engaged in the sale of general merchandise, furniture, household goods, dry goods, clothing, hardware, paint, household appliances, and/or books, and by adding the designation of SP in the IL zone in the column for retail facilities of less than 12,000 square feet in size, where such charitable entity is a nonprofit organization with an IRS 501c3 designation and is engaged in the sale of general merchandise, furniture, household goods, dry goods, clothing, hardware, paint, household appliances, and/or books. So I would propose that language. I'd make that in the form of a motion. I would point out that although that may seem a little redundant, what I just read, the reason for the redundancy is that we need to first add the use to the table because it doesn't exist today, and then we need to specify in the table which specific zoning district where it would be an allowed use by special permit. So that's the reason for the redundancy. I did have an opportunity to run this by Mr. Bellavance in advance of the meeting, and I won't speak for him, but he did seem to indicate to me that he thought that this was sound. But before we would act on the motion, I'd ask for Mr. Bellavance to comment on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor McGinn. Mr. Bellavance, please.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I wanted to, basically my attempt was to put together some general, quick language to get before the subcommittee, because you had been discussing this for some time, and I did thought at that time, by getting this to you, I may have wanted to change the language in regards to tighten that up, and what Councilor McGinn and I discussed thought was appropriate for that, and it was a good suggestion and should fit in there nicely.
Thank you, Mr. Bellavance. Councilor McGinn.
Yeah,
please.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the motion would be to advance this language as read to the full council for action with a recommendation to send to the planning board. So moved.
You heard the motion by Councilor McGinn. I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge respectfully Mr. Brenner. Mr. Joel Brenner is here in support of this, and Mr. Gary Cowles. Mr. Cowles, I believe you're the president of Habitat. Thank you for being here in support of what we believe is a very worthwhile project for the city, and we are supportive. Any comments on Councilor McGinn's motion? There being none, roll call vote, please.
Councilors McGinn.
Yes.
Rozignol.
Yes.
Sasslaw.
Yes.
Charis.
Yes.
Gould.
Yes.
Motion carries 5-0.
Move to adjourn.
You heard the motion. We are adjourned. Thank you.